I think this is a really important concept to wrap our minds around. So we have basic human rights that do not come from the government. The government doesn't give us our rights. No matter where you live or where you're born, you have basic human rights, and the government can't give them to you. And to take them away is a violation. The only thing governments can do is respect those rights or violate those rights. And they tend to and trend towards infringement, just as a feature of government. But, it's a misconception here in the United States. We have people say, well, I have the freedom of speech because I have my First Amendment right. Well, we're able to execute freedom of speech, which is our right, without retaliation from the government, in most cases anyway. And it is largely because of that First Amendment right, which is part of the Bill of Rights. It's a really cool document because it doesn't tell the individual what he can and can't do. It tells the government what it can and can't do pertaining to the rights that individual has, which it calls inalienable. Is what it refers to these rights as, which means they can't be transferred. It's not something that to give away or take away. It's not like a car that has a title that you could sell and buy and give. Right? It's not like that. You inherently have these rights at your very core. These things exist. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be violated or not. And a violation of these rights is wrong, right? It's against kind of natural law. So it's something to think about. Now, governments will always try to find that slippery, sneaky snake kind of way around and still violate your rights without violating the contracts that hold them to a different standard, like the Bill of Rights. I'll give you an example of this. Property, with the right to life, liberty, and property. Property is one of them. So you can own that house, but the government is going to create laws to try to get around that and say, for example, you have to pay taxes to us. If not, we will take that house, right? And so you don't pay taxes, you've broken the law, we're going to take the house. I'm not a legal expert, but this is just an example, right? So this is a way that they've kind of circumnavigated, because you got to watch governments because they're always going to do this. It's just in their interest as a feature. But that's an example. So you can have property, but you have to pay taxes, whatever. Another example is this. It's like life. Well, you have the right to life. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means if somebody comes up and tries to take your life, you have every right to defend it. You have the right to self-defense. This is natural. Whether the government tells you you do or not, you have that right. But some governments get around that, and they say things like, well, you have the right to self-defense, but it's got to be reasonable. And also, you can't carry pepper spray even, you can't carry objects in order to defend yourself. But if you have an object and, you could use anything to defend yourself, we're not taking your right away, but we're going to say that you can't do this, this, and this. And that basically eliminates your ability to exercise that right. So governments will do that. If you have a government that does that, I would argue that you have a tyrannical government, man. So that's an example for that. And it's like, another right, the right to liberty. Well, that's freedom of speech. It's freedom of thought. It's pretty inherent that we have these rights. So you have a mouth so you can speak. You have a mind so you can think. So you should be able to think freely, and you should be able to speak freely. And while we have, even here in America, the First Amendment, there are ways around that where, and more government people and people not even in the government are trying to strip that right away from themselves. It's really kind of odd, because many people, I've actually literally talked to these people, and they'll say things like, well, we shouldn't have this right, we shouldn't have the right to say whatever we want because it might offend somebody, right? Or we shouldn't have the right to all of these different means and tools to defend ourselves because that's a little too much, right? We shouldn't have those things. Or, well, maybe we shouldn't own, maybe we shouldn't own things the way we do. Maybe we shouldn't own anything, right? You've all heard the you'll own nothing and be happy with it. That's these people. That's that type of mentality. Where maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should all just ride share. Maybe we should all just use, use these things to collectively, right? So these are ways in which governments and people in their own ideologies, which really aren't their own, usually influenced by something else, right? But this is ways where they will try to get around these rights, which are natural rights. You really can't take away, but what you can do is you can inhibit people from the ability to exercise these. And that is done all around the world. And I would say if your government's doing that in any way, shape, or form, that is a feature of tyranny. And so it's something to think about, man. Yeah, we don't get our rights from the government. Even the Bill of Rights, it's an awesome document. But that's not what gives us our rights. We don't derive them from that. We're given them at birth. It's natural rights, God-given rights, however you explain it or think about it. We have those. And so it's important to remember that. I think it's a great idea to keep alive, that's why I'm talking about it right now. I thought we should discuss these things. We should discuss this and just I want to hear what you have to say about this and what you think about this. And yeah, there's a difference in between rights and privileges, and there's a difference in between civil law and all these different things. I'm not a legal expert, but it seems like to me the government would like to try to turn all of our rights, into privileges, at least trick us into thinking that they're privileges, in order to, because with privileges, like in my country, driving on the road is a privilege. So you have the right, the freedom of movement, because we have legs, right? We're supposed to be able to move. So this is a natural right to have the freedom of movement. But you want to get into a car and go down a road, that's a privilege. So we're going to tax the car. We're gonna make you take a license, test or whatever, and then you have to have the license, and then there's laws and there's rules of the road. Some of that stuff makes sense. If you're gonna have a system like that, you have to have some form of standardization. You have to have that in order for things not to be absolute chaos. But at the end of the day, even in my mind, that is also another way around to kind of like maybe restrict that freedom of movement just a little bit. It's just a little bit. It's not a crazy one. But I think in the coming years we're going to see, and we've seen in past years, them trying to get around that. And so keep your eyes out on that stuff, man. Be vigilant, because there is always going to be this movement. Governments, they just naturally tend this way. They can't help themselves. It's part of the way government works. I mean, if you think about what they do, what a government does to implement certain policies, the easiest way would be by force, really, or the most direct way, rather. But then there's other ways that are like this kind of almost coercion, almost like trickery, really, using laws. So keep your eyes out for this stuff. If they start saying you can't say this because it might offend these people, or we're not allowed to talk about this, we're not allowed to talk about that, and they start actually punishing people for doing so, these are tyrannical tendencies. It just is what it is, because they're inhibiting that natural right, that natural freedom that we all have. If somebody's speaking, and I like the freedom of speech, because if somebody's speaking and they're a total nut job, right, and they mean harm to people or whatever, you're going to know about it, because they have the freedom of speech and they're yelling it through the rooftops or whatever. And now we can deal with the situation. We kind of know what we're dealing with, right? And you can decide where you stand on that. And like I was saying in the Safe Spaces video, these ideas and concepts should be able to stand on their own. So if they're in the public square, or if you're public about it and you bring them up, they'll either stand on their own or they'll just collapse under the pressure of the truth, right? Anyway, yeah, I was just thinking about that. Rights don't come from the government, guys. You have rights. Even if your government says that you don't, you have those rights. And if they are trying to infringe upon them or inhibit your ability to exercise them at all, that is tyranny. And you know, it's something to consider, right? I'm not saying what to do about it or anything like that. I'm just saying these are thoughts that I think we need to continue to discuss. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about it in the comments. I'm going to leave it at that for the video, and I will catch you guys on the next one. I'm out.